So we're talking about car share and how we can encourage more people to share their journeys to work. Haven't got any thoughts on that?
Anyone got any, Ruth?
Coming into Bristol from the south on the A370, they only allow you to go in a certain lane if there's more than one person in the car. I've not seen that anywhere else, but I actually think it's a very good idea. I mean, people were using blow-up images, but put that aside. But if we put that aside, actually, I think that's a really good idea because people always want to go in the bus lane, and it was a bus lane equivalent. And if people can get to work quicker by car sharing, it's got to be something in it for them. That's the thing. People tend to be, I'll do it if I gain something else, and if they can get their journey to work cut down, that would be helpful. So perhaps we should be looking at something like that in this county.
Mark, what about that as an idea for County Council?
It is something that we actively promote already, and
it's not on our radar, is it?
I guess it's one of those things. It is something that we're actually promoting at the moment. It's something we want to do more of in the future, but actually what it requires is companies to get on board with that as well, because that's where the car sharing clubs will be based. It will be your local employers where you'll have 4 or 5 in an office who come from generally the same direction and say, hey, do you know what, let's share a car. And we can work with businesses to help deliver that. With regards to incentives, I think there's lots that we can look at as well with regards to making it worth people's while. But also, I think the bottom line is, if you're travelling long distances, say you're travelling from Bristol to Gloucester, car sharing actually makes financial sense for the individual because you're cutting your fuel costs by half if there's 2 of you in a car instead of 2 going cars separately. So I think it's about communications and messages, and I actually think there's a lot that local businesses can do with their employees to encourage car sharing as a business as usual approach.
Yeah. Mark, are businesses doing anything about that? Are they communicating that message?
I think car sharing is one option, but the problem with giving access on the carriageway is the carriageway is a limited resource in itself. If you start splitting it up even further into bus lanes and car sharing lanes, there is no space left. So I think it comes back to providing adequate facilities for people to use the public transport networks that are already there for people that are travelling in and out of large centres and parking rides.
You would say that.
I wouldn't.
No, seriously, what is the big idea that Stagecoach have for this? Because this is a good question.
It's about. We spoke earlier about the problems with rural areas and that you can't operate highly frequent services because there's no sort of critical mass there. It's about creating a centre where people can converge, and then you start to go to market, and then you can sort of deliver a solution from there. So it's about creating centres for people to arrive at so that they can share facilities, be that cars or buses or trains or whatever. But it's about bringing people together. So right, here is a facility, it runs from here, and it gets you into the middle, and it gets you back out again, and it just allows people to bring together. And Cambridge has been particularly successful at that. The city is surrounded by park and ride sites. People are now running into those park and ride sites at the expense of the provision of rural services, which are getting harder and harder to operate at a margin, because people are so used to, I'll get in my car, I'll share my car journey with 3 or 4 people to the park and ride site, and we go off into our day's business and we come back again.
Yeah, Patricia?
Well, I just think we need to add to this new ways of working as well, people working at home. And we've got an information technology revolution that's taken place. It's so good now, the capacity to communicate from a distance, that a lot of these journeys probably aren't necessary. And I think it comes back to employers of all kinds trying to think through how they can facilitate staff working at a distance and remotely.
We do all of that. We've got car sharing, bike to work schemes, and we've got people who work 2 days a week in the office. All of those things are. It's a bit like the solution to the source of new energy. You've got to do all of it because the car sharing won't work for some. The government had a great incentive on the bike to work scheme, and a hell of a lot of bikes were bought. And not all of them are used every day, if I'm honest, but a significant proportion of them are actually. Quite right.
I got my bike to work on Monday. I went and collected my bike under the scheme myself, so I'm planning to cycle to work.
Bristol.
No, I'm in Gloucester. Yeah. I think this point that Patricia was making about home working is absolutely key. I think the technological revolution is well ahead of businesses. There is the facility to work from home. Gordon Brown has announced he is putting a lot more into broadband. The idea is that the rural areas will be joined up. There will be at least, I think it's 2 megabytes, isn't it, facility in your rural areas. And therefore, once people have that, and they have to a large degree, there are not that many areas where you don't have the broadband coverage now. There is actually, you know, it's just got to be a change of mindset in employers' way of thinking. I mean, you're well ahead of the game here. I have to say, Arthur, your company is obviously very conscious of these issues and has implemented all the right policies, and exactly what you were saying about you've got to have a range of them. Yeah. But you are ahead of most businesses. There's definitely got to be a change of mindset in terms of the daily grind coming to the office, thinking about working at home.
Taking this point, and I think it's a really good point about broadband. Mark, I mean, we know that Gloucestershire is not particularly well served. In fact, one of our papers, the Foresters' only campaign about this, it's appalling in the forest particularly. What can be done about this? Because we hear lots of platitudes from the government, but we don't see a great deal of action.
It is a real difficult one, and I don't think local government can necessarily have the solution, because it is about infrastructure, and it's about making sure the infrastructure is put in place and it gets to those hard to reach places. A huge amount of investment was done by companies that were TeleWest, now Virgin Media, back in the 90s, in the easy areas to actually deliver that sort of network. But actually now we're looking at this real divide between urban and rural areas, and it's encouraging businesses to actually go out there and deliver that broadband length to those little villages and little hamlets that, you know, that are currently cut off. Now, the situation is, as Ruth quite rightly says, most places can get some form of broadband coverage today. There will be some isolated pockets which don't, but actually it's also about the speed of that broadband as well, because there is a big difference between what you can do with a sort of a very low 1 meg or 2 meg speed broadband to something that's 10, even 50 megabytes that's been delivered by some companies today. And, you know, it's an ongoing challenge to make sure that the rural areas are not left behind continually in what is, I think, a real growth industry, not only with regards to how people, you know, receive their home entertainment, but also the opportunities for people to work at home and to do business at home. And I think that is something that really does need to be tackled.
Chris, what does the government need to do in terms of the cabling? You're a developer. This is close to your heart, isn't it?
Yes. I think there's two elements. Mark was saying you've got any number of providers, so they are putting in the systems. I think that it has to be a sort of a carrot and stick approach to basically get that infrastructure out, because obviously the government themselves are not putting in the infrastructure, these various providers are. I think some work has been on to that, to open up things like BT systems and networks and things like that. I think there can be sharing. I think that reduces costs, it makes it much more beneficial. I think that it doesn't really make sense to have a number of different providers putting in the same infrastructure. I think what we really need is top-notch infrastructure that any number of service providers can use. And I think the government has to take the lead on that.
They are actually, sorry to interrupt, they are actually doing that. So NTL that have a much bigger broadband, or not NTL as you call it, Virgin Media now, have a much bigger broadband connection being encouraged and controlled and pushed into opening up to BT, funny enough, so it's a reverse kind of opening up. So, you know, that I'm kind of worried about this rural-urban thing that's kind of splitting up, only because I think that by its very nature, your 80-20 rule will operate, Pareto's law, in the kind of urban area. So, yes, we've got to look after our rural communities, of course we do, but if our target is to reduce emissions, if you've got 1,000 people driving through Cheltenham to their offices, and you can reduce that, as opposed to a rural area where you've got a huge cost of investment to give them this broadband that 5 people are going to take advantage of, it's not going to work. So I don't want to be parochial, I don't want to be, you know, NIMBY, whatever it is. I'm just saying that if we're going to make the hits, make them where they have the biggest effect.